high above the swirling arms of the Milky Way, in a star-spangled tapestry that stretched across eons, the Galactic Assembly convened in the hyper-sterile grandeur of the Celestia Forum. This forum was an orbital construct the size of a small moon, built to host delegates from every known sentient species. It was famously administered by a labyrinthine bureaucracy, a cosmic machine so vast and precise that the faintest suspicion of error would earn you an hour-long diatribe on the Council's infallible methodology. There, drifting in artificial gravity, tables of chromium-laced alloys shone under the glare of full-spectrum lighting, and emissaries of 212 different species muttered among themselves in hushed tones. The reason for this gathering was the annual revision of the Pangalactic Classification Index, an encyclopedic attempt to categorize every life form in the known universe into neat little boxes. According to the official narrative, such labels helped maintain order. In reality, they were about as illuminating as describing a hurricane by cataloging individual raindrops. Yet the bureaucracy adored it. The staff updated subcategories with obvious glee. Some of the more stoic representatives rolled multiple sets of eyes at the pomp, while others yawned from behind face masks or chitinous shells. Toward the rear of the forum, a trio of Alaxian archivists fussed over their datapads. They were double-checking entries for the species known as humans. The official listing stated, humans, classification B4, moderately advanced bipeds with excessive politeness, a historical penchant for conflict resolution through endless discussion, and a preference for caffeinated beverages. A small footnote read, often apologizes for perceived inconveniences, even if they are not responsible. In bureaucratic terms, that was considered a robust summary. However, many in the assembly believed it skimmed over a few vital facts, like the times humans had tested devastating weapons, waged wars among themselves, and later devised elaborate rules to keep that destructive capacity chained. The footnote didn't even mention the curious phenomenon of them forming orderly lines, queues, they called them, in the face of scarce resources. In fairness, the Council had never quite figured out how to label this particular trait. Was it an evolutionary quirk, a random cultural habit, or an elaborate strategy to prevent internal chaos? Their best anthropologists and xenosociologists had discussed the matter in circles, usually concluding that humans were odd but harmless. Odd because they insisted on complex etiquette, harmless because they rarely flaunted large military fleets. They were dependable trade partners, enthusiastic about interspecies cultural festivals, and famous for welcoming visitors with an endless parade of polite gestures. One particularly satirical alien publication had called them the galaxy's best dinner guests. Seated in a plush grav chair, Diurnal Tor, the Serapex Collective, sipped a beverage that changed colors based on the acidity of the consumer's saliva, remarking to an associate, "The humans are pleasant enough. Soft power, they call it." Endearing, if somewhat naive. There were nods among the listening delegates. This was the common perception. Humans are friendly. They used words like "pardon me" and "could you please," and they seemed to want nothing more than a quiet place in the cosmic tapestry. Unbeknownst to those nodding delegates, a silent tension lurked beneath that veneer of courtesy. For centuries, humans had diligently built alliances, shown unwavering politeness, and abided by regulations that many found stifling. But those who had delved into the hidden archives of human history understood that civility could be a fortress masking something else, something older and far more intimidating. The majority of the galaxy's species did not suspect any such thing. Most were content to let the classification stand as is, B4 for humans, presumably harmless. Why question the Council's classification system? After all, it had only been known to fail on a handful of occasions, usually involving catastrophic misjudgments that ended in short, brutal wars. But every new species liked to believe that the bureaucracy, with its infinite checklists and forms, would never mislead them. A sense of fleeting stability reigned. Fleets of merchant ships roamed the hyperlanes, exchanging goods between star systems, forging cross-cultural recipes, and broadcasting educational programs about everything from alien zoology to the many ways one could greet a human. Then, as it sometimes does in the cosmic dance, discord arrived unexpectedly. This time, it wore the face of the Kragzor, a race newly poised to enter the Assembly's fold, or so the naive among the council believed. The Kragzor were apex predators from a harsh planet. Evolution had endowed them with thick exoskeletons, razor-edged mandibles, and a social hierarchy that prized raw might. Their worldview revolved around conflict as a sacred principle, where displays of dominance were not only accepted but encouraged as a demonstration of one's natural right to lead. They had subjugated several less militarized species on the outskirts of the galaxy before they ever came to the Assembly's attention. By the time the Council realized the Kragzor's ambitions, the question wasn't whether they would try to expand, but whose territory they would target first. Those who paid attention saw trouble brewing the moment the Kragzor envoy arrived at Celestia Forum. They performed a ritual that involved screeching calls, slamming heavy metal staves on the polished floors, and proclaiming their martial achievements. The entire forum echoed with their feral howls, which triggered a wave of disapproving murmurs from more refined species. The humans, for their part, responded by shifting politely in their seats, wearing carefully neutral expressions. The older among them recognized the phenomenon all too well, a militaristic society seeking to size up potential adversaries. Warlord Hraxer, the head of the Kragzor delegation, sorted to a diatribe about how true strength must guide interstellar relations. When he finished, he fixed his fierce, multifaceted eyes on the human representatives, as though challenging them to protest. Instead, the humans welcomed him with a measured round of applause, politely acknowledging the introduction. Several watchers thought the humans were being too polite, almost obsequious. But that was the hallmark of human diplomacy. They rarely matched aggression with aggression, at least not initially. A quiet tension settled in the forum as people whispered speculation. Would these Kragzor try to pick a fight with the placid, sweetly smiling humans? The Terrans, after all, were rumored to have endured centuries of internal wars before forging their united Earth government. But that was ancient history, wasn't it? Warlord Hraxer was unimpressed by courtesy or ancient rumors. He saw only a species that apologized even when someone else stepped on their foot. Such behavior, in Kragzor culture, signaled a feeble constitution. After a formal session of the Council, in which the humans presented a detailed analysis of a new interspecies trade route, complete with color-coded graphs, Hraxer sneered. "Pathetic creatures," he muttered to his subcommander. They asked for dialogue. Their greatest weapon is a slideshow. We could conquer them in the time it takes to sharpen our claws. The subcommander let out a series of shrill clicks indicating agreement. From the vantage of the Kragzor, the humans were ripe for a demonstration of real dominance. So it was hardly surprising that within a matter of months, Warlord Hraxer turned his gaze to the frontier worlds of human space. He boasted that if the humans refused to demonstrate any martial prowess, the Kragzor would push until they either surrendered or revealed their hidden might. Human diplomatic channels came alive with polite messages of concern. Ambassadors extended official letters. "We respectfully request an audience to clarify your intentions, or it would be greatly appreciated if you refrained from unauthorized military maneuvers." The Kragzor found these statements so laughable that they cited them as reasons to escalate. They publicly proclaimed that humanity's unwillingness to brandish arms was proof of weakness. The Kragzor prepared a small test incursion to gauge just how pitiful the humans truly were. Largely, the galaxy watched with mild curiosity. Many saw this as a chance to confirm or disprove the infamous B for classification. Some, like the Valaxian archivists, were sure the humans would fold under pressure. Others were uncertain. A few, notably the older Xanthillian historians, recalled obscure references to Earth's warlike past. They used to develop weapons so destructive that they wrote entire moral codes to keep them in check, noted one Xanthillian scholar. His colleagues dismissed him, insisting that the humans' biggest current show of force was their talent at making coffee that could keep other species awake for days. Meanwhile, on the outskirts of human space, the inhabitants of Rhea Station, a mid-sized colony orbiting a resource-rich planet, received word of the Kragzor's rumored approach. Instead of preparing to fight, they methodically evacuated, leaving the habitat all but empty. They took personal belongings, essential technology, and anything that might be exploited by an occupying force. By the time the Kragzor's forward scouts arrived, Rhea Station was silent, save for automated beacons broadcasting a courteous request. For the safety of all parties, please do not enter restricted areas. Have a pleasant day. The Kragzor, naturally, took this as a sign of cowardice. Their dreadnoughts deployed landing parties with minimal caution. They were annoyed to find the colony's power generators had been carefully dismantled, rendering the station worthless for immediate exploitation. In vain, they tried to interpret the humans' improbable strategy. Warlord Hraxer declared it an act of tactical absurdity, convinced this was just more evidence that humans lacked any real spine. Subsequent dispatches from Kragzor scouts throughout human frontier territories repeated the pattern. Lightly populated worlds, methodical evacuations, infrastructure rendered non-functional, a maddening absence of direct resistance. The few messages humans did send arrived in the form of polite disclaimers. We respectfully cannot permit your incursion, or we humbly request that you attend diplomatic talks. Where was the challenge? Where was the fight? In the Council's next emergency session, the Kragzor were not only unapologetic, but openly mocked the humans. They run and hide. They wave documents in our face instead of weapons, barked Hraxer. At the other end of the semicircular chamber, the lead human ambassador, a silver-haired woman named Lucille Carter, calmly adjusted her glasses and replied, "We do not seek conflict, Warlord. Conflict is rarely beneficial if it can be prevented." Her voice was measured, unwavering. Those who paid close attention might have glimpsed an unsettling flicker behind her polite smile. Hraxer rose to his full height. "We do not require your permission to expand," he growled. "You cannot hide forever. Either face us in honorable combat, or yield your territory." Ambassador Carter's expression remained composed. "We invite you to further negotiations. There are treaties that protect both sides," she said. "It would be in everyone's best interest." She might have been reading from a bureaucratic script, yet something in her posture suggested that this was not the entire story. An uneasy hush spread among the other delegates. Many had never seen Lucille Carter lose her composure, but they sensed an undercurrent of iron behind her unassuming manner. She had been Earth's representative for over a decade, famed for deftly mediating interplanetary disputes. Now, she was dealing with a species that refused all negotiation. As the council session ended, a Saravian observer confided to a colleague, "When a species known for relentless courtesy speaks with that tone, we might have a problem." The Kragzor, of course, disregarded such warnings. They read these polite calls for peace as further proof of feebleness. In the months that followed, they stepped up their incursions into human space, ransacking outposts that had been left nearly deserted and issuing triumphant broadcasts about how easily humanity would submit. Those broadcasts circulated widely, feeding the rumor mill. Pundits from various species debated how soon Earth might yield or whether they would sign away their territories in some humiliating treaty. Editorials in the cosmic press called humans the galaxy's doormat, implying they had no backbone for war. Yet, behind closed doors, the humans were not quite so docile. They had begun recalling personnel from missions across the galaxy. University programs shut down their foreign exchange branches overnight. Massive cargo fleets changed their routes to avoid Kragzor-controlled sectors. Seemingly innocuous technology supply deals were quietly suspended, and interstellar corporations based on Earth withdrew from trade agreements. It was as if a slow wind was gathering, turning the placid waters of galactic commerce into a swirling vortex. If the Kragzor had been more attentive, they might have noticed how many unsuspecting devices, communication relays, navigation modules, and software subroutines used by multiple species bore the imprint of human engineering. Humans had always been enthusiastic innovators, adept at weaving subtle security backdoors or layered redundancies to ensure operational safety. Over decades, the galaxy at large had come to rely on human-designed systems, not suspecting they might be more than they appeared. A few experts outside humanity began piecing these clues together. A Turian intelligence analyst discovered unexplainable code fragments in a system update for FDL navigation. Those fragments hinted at advanced infiltration capabilities. However, the analyst's superiors dismissed the idea that mild-mannered humans could engineer such powerful infiltration software. It sounded preposterous. Meanwhile, a Xanthilian historian recalled ancient references to Earth's capacity for total war, but was told by a top official, "They're pacifists now." That was centuries ago. Their certainty was tested when the Kragzor, drunk on easy successes, declared that they would move en masse against a major human colony, New Arcadia. Unlike the smaller outposts, this was not some remote station. New Arcadia was an established settlement with millions of residents, a robust economy, and strategic significance. Perhaps the Kragzor believed this would be their ultimate proof of human weakness. If the Terrans couldn't defend such a key system, then indeed they were no threat. A Kragzor armada of 46 warships dropped out of hyperspace near New Arcadia's orbit. To their surprise, the colony was not abandoned. Their sensors detected the presence of numerous craft, but these vessels were not standard battlecruisers. At a glance, they resembled cargo ships or science vessels, with minimal heat signatures where weapon systems should have been. The Kragzor commander gave a triumphant hiss, ordering an immediate attack. Show them the folly of their pretense. The warships released a volley of plasma beams, but, inexplicably, the projectiles vanished before striking the target. Sensors registered no impact, no scattering, no standard shield deflection. It was as though space itself had simply swallowed the plasma. The Kragzor fired again, with identical results. Meanwhile, the cargo ships hovered in a disciplined formation, transmitting a single message on all channels. "We request that you stand down and depart. Hostile action will not be tolerated." Enraged, the Kragzor commander unleashed the entire fleet's artillery, intending to overwhelm whatever bizarre defense the humans were using. But in seconds, the warship's power grids flickered, their weapons went offline, and their propulsion systems stuttered. One by one, the mighty vessels found themselves drifting aimlessly, as though an invisible hand had yanked the plug. The panic escalated when life support and gravity control began fluctuating. The Kragzor's attempts to override the shutdown were met with an error message in their own language. "System locked. Please consult your nearest human technical specialist." In the newly silent command deck, the Kragzor officer stared at those words with growing dread. "How is this possible?" he shouted. "We use Kragzor-coded encryption. Our systems are self-contained." None of it mattered. The infiltration was total. Engines, weapons, communications, all disabled by an unseen intrusion that recognized every protocol, every failsafe. Moments later, screens throughout the entire armada lit up with the calm face of Admiral Leon Winters, a human officer wearing a crisp uniform with no visible rank insignia. "I regret that we must resort to these measures," he said. "We offer negotiations, but your actions have forced our hand." The boarding that followed was almost anticlimactic. Small squads of humans in understated gray exosuits systematically secured each Kragzor warship without encountering organized resistance. The Kragzor, floating in zero-G inside their powerless craft, had no capacity to fight effectively. They were sealed into containment areas, and their weapons were confiscated. And throughout it all, the humans remained disturbingly polite. "Please place your hands, if you have hands, on the indicated restraints. We will ensure your safety during this process," an automated message repeated. The subjugation of an entire invasion fleet had never looked so strangely bureaucratic. News of the fiasco spread through the galactic networks with astonishing speed. For the first time, many species realized that the humans' seemingly humble technological contributions, operating systems, data encryption, communication frameworks, were the lifeblood of modern interstellar civilization. They're integrated into everything, whispered a stunned hegemony liaison, staring at diagnostic logs filled with indecipherable code. They could pull the plug on us any time they wanted. At Celestia Forum, the next emergency council meeting descended into near chaos. The Kragzor representative bellowed accusations. This is an act of war. Lucille Carter and her delegation listened calmly. When the presiding official demanded an explanation, she replied, "We only disabled their weapons to prevent further bloodshed. We offered them numerous chances for a diplomatic resolution, which they declined." The tension was palpable. Diplomats from other species turned wide eyes on the humans, re-evaluating old assumptions. Their naive illusions evaporated. B4 classification? That was now a cosmic joke. There was no easy label for a species that could, with apparent ease, disable entire fleets from the inside out. Yet the humans' posture remained consistent. They did not demand territory, tribute, or any spoils of war. They insisted they wished for peace. The question that haunted everyone was, what if the Kragzor provoked them again? Warlord Hraxer, humiliated by the fiasco, refused to concede. He proclaimed a state of total war, calling upon Kragzor worlds to muster their entire military might. "They have compromised our systems from within," he roared before a cheering crowd on his homeworld. "But we will find ways to purge their vile infiltration. We will harness older, more primal weapons beyond their sabotage." The crowd brandished ceremonial blades and roared in approval, vowing to avenge their shamed armada. Across Kragzor territories, the push for war reached fever pitch. They retrieved archaic hardware, ballistic missiles, chemical bombs, anything that might circumvent the digital infiltration that so easily neutralized their advanced ships. Meanwhile, humanity projected an eerie calm. They recalled more of their envoys, shuttered embassies, and advised their citizens off-world to return home. The rest of the galaxy watched with mounting alarm. Species that once joked about human bureaucracy now realized it had been a cunning camouflage for deeper preparations. As if to confirm these fears, some planetary governments that had installed human-based operating systems found unexpected lockouts. Their screens displayed cryptic messages urging them to remain neutral in the upcoming conflict. On the Kragzor homeworld, they readied a centuries-old planet-killer device, a massive warhead designed before digital infiltration was a concern. This relic was crude but devastating. Observers prayed the humans' infiltration wouldn't reach hardware so primitive. But it turned out that infiltration was just one facet of human power. Another part was a decades-long effort to embed unstoppable kill switches in essential galactic infrastructure. The moment Kragzor technicians tried to fuel the planet killer, every safety mechanism froze. Liquid propellant lines locked shut, meltdown alarms went off, and the warhead's ignition system displayed the same politely worded error message in Kragzor script. Operational parameters exceeded. Please contact Earth Technical Support for assistance. At that point, the entire Kragzor Strategic Command understood the horrifying truth. There was nowhere in the modern or even semi-modern technological spectrum the humans had not anticipated. Their infiltration was as meticulous as it was total. In desperation, the Kragzor High Council opted to launch ballistic missiles from old silos with purely mechanical triggers. No digital systems involved. They aimed these missiles at a second major human colony. Everyone braced for impact. But as the missiles soared into the upper atmosphere of the Kragzor homeworld, something else intervened. Black triangular craft that had never before been witnessed in human fleets. They materialized in orbit, unleashing pulses of gravitational distortion that caused the warheads to crumble mid-flight. Not a single missile escaped the planet's gravity well. Galactic intelligence feeds exploded with data about the graviton pulses. No one had realized the humans had progressed so far in theoretical physics. Yet, There it was, a demonstration that they could manipulate fundamental forces with frightening accuracy. The same unstoppable courtesy accompanied the maneuver. A voice broadcast in the Kragzor's own language declared, "We regret any damage this may cause to your infrastructure. However, your attempt to deploy mass-destructive devices demands an immediate and firm response. We implore you to cease hostilities." In the aftermath of these events, the magnitude of the humans' quiet, methodical buildup became apparent. Embarrassed cosmic powers confessed they had overlooked centuries of Earth's subtle expansions in research, infiltration, and strategic planning. Many realized that while humans had politely participated in trade, they'd also insisted on writing or co-writing the underlying code for everything from warp drives to translation software. It was genius, hidden beneath the friendliest facade imaginable. Back at Celestia Forum, pandemonium reigned as member species clamored for answers. They demanded a statement from the Terran delegation. Ambassador Carter, the face of unwavering diplomacy, looked weary. When the assembly reached order, she stood at the central dais. "We never wished for war. We have always acted in good faith to maintain galactic harmony. Yet we understood long ago that we were not alone in this universe, and that some might see our courtesy as feebleness." She paused, scanning the crowd of anxious delegates. "So we made preparations. Our intention was never conquest, but deterrence. If the Kragzor or anyone else insisted on forcing us to defend ourselves, we would do so swiftly and decisively." Her voice remained calm, yet there was no mistaking the finality in it. "Civility is not a weakness. It is a choice," she said. "For centuries, we have chosen to abide by moral codes that limit our worst impulses. But do not mistake that for an inability to unleash them. We want peace. We will always extend the hand of friendship first. But if you try to pry that hand open by force, what you find inside may terrify you." A hush fell over the chamber. Even the Kragzor representative, looking defeated and bandaged from the fiasco, did not snarl or retort. For a species that revered open conflict, they had tasted the futility of fighting an enemy that could shut down their entire war machine with a few keystrokes. That same day, the Kragzor High Council sent an encoded message to Earth, requesting negotiations for a ceasefire, an unconditional surrender by any other name. Terms were hammered out swiftly. The Kragzor were to withdraw from all human-claimed territories, relinquish all advanced weapons programs, and allow monitoring by neutral parties. In return, humanity offered assistance in rebuilding disabled systems. Yes, even for the Kragzor. They had no interest in occupying or humiliating them further. In the days that followed, the strangest sight in the galaxy was the once fearsome Kragzor warlord standing at a negotiation table, eyes lowered, signing a treaty that recognized human autonomy and promised non-aggression. Ambassador Carter offered a polite "thank you for your cooperation," and not a hint of condescension. This display of measured magnanimity unsettled many observers. The humans weren't reveling in their triumph. They didn't parade their captured warships in victory processions. They simply concluded the matter as though finalizing a mundane contract. When the treaty was made public, a wave of frantic recalibrations rippled across the galaxy. Diplomatic protocols were rewritten. Manuals on interspecies interaction introduced a new chapter: how to engage with humanity without triggering a total shutdown of your infrastructure. Critically, the update included a caution: under no circumstance should one interpret human civility as submission. Reports emerged of newly minted paranoia among certain species. The Thren, for example, double-checked every line of code in their Starship computers to ensure they were not reliant on unrecognized human subroutines. The Valaxians, ironically, started training their bureaucrats to approach Terran forms with heightened respect, fearful that a small act of disrespect might one day cause catastrophic retribution. Even the timid Arivians, known for their pacifism, took note. If the humans were to ever slip from their polite restraints, it could be the end of entire star systems. The Kragzor themselves underwent an astonishing transformation. In their dealings with other species, They now tried to mimic human niceties, hoping to avoid any chance of provoking that terrifying hidden might. Where once they roared challenges, they now practiced saying, "Excuse us, may we cross this sector?" in stilted basic. News outlets across multiple star systems found this shift so bizarre that they labeled it the Krag-Zor conversion. Of course, the humans did not gloat. They carried on with their conferences, their summits, their amusements. Behind the scenes, however, more than a few ambassadors from other worlds approached them with caution, some stammering, "We truly appreciate your peaceful stance. We, trust it continues." The standard human reply was a tranquil, "We see no need to pursue any conflict, so long as our sovereignty and well-being are respected." That was enough to make certain hawkish species break out in metaphorical cold sweats. In the aftermath of the Krag-Zor fiasco, the galaxy collectively updated the Pangalactic Classification Index. Humans were no longer B4. A special annotation was added. Humans, reserved tier, demonstrates advanced infiltration capabilities, non-traditional warfare, and an extraordinary capacity for strategic restraint. Some species joked that they needed a new category altogether, maximum diplomatic threat. But the Council's official stance was more measured. They recognized that the humans had, after all, avoided mass casualties. Even the captured Krag-Zor were treated well and eventually returned to their home planets. Whether the humans' demonstration counted as moral high ground or cunning intimidation was debated endlessly in academic circles. Xenopsychologists composed treatises about the human condition, calling them ex-predators who consciously tamed themselves, and warning that in provoking them, one risked unleashing a predator's cunning plus an advanced society's relentless technology. They built a cage of manners, locked themselves in, and swallowed the key, wrote one scholar. But if you threaten them enough, they'll find a spare key. Pray you never see it in action. In time, the galactic community regained a semblance of equilibrium. Trade resumed. Diplomatic visits continued. Yet a subtle, enduring tension lingered. People no longer chuckled at the idea that humans apologize too often. Instead, they marveled at the self-discipline behind such courtesy. Indeed, from that point forward, few dared to push humanity to the edge. The abiding lesson was repeated in hushed tones. If a mild request from humans is ignored, they'll simply make it unstoppable. If they say please and you don't comply, you might wake up to your entire fleet drifting powerless in orbit. The final, unspoken message that resounded through hyperlanes and the hallways of the Celestia Forum was clear: don't make humans drop their civility. You might not survive what happens next. Quietly, Earth returned to its day-to-day affairs. The populace was largely unaware of the panic their species had caused. Sure, there was the occasional meme floating around about polite infiltration. Students at Earth's famed universities joked that they were writing the next round of unstoppable code that would keep the galaxy safe or terrified. But for the average citizen, life continued with all the familiar rhythms: commuting to jobs, savoring coffee, apologizing on sidewalks when passers-by bumped shoulders. Nothing seemed particularly ominous or sinister about them at all. That, in essence, was the real marvel. Within 6 months, the Krag-Zor concluded a sincerity test. They allowed human humanitarian vessels to help rebuild certain damaged stations. The humans arrived with open supply crates, carefully explaining the new technology installation and offering tutorials. It was unbelievably gracious, far more than the Krag-Zor felt they deserved. Their generals watched with a peculiar mix of relief and dread, as if uncertain whether they were witnessing angels of mercy or silent watchers who could cripple them again with a single keystroke. During one such reconstruction project, a Krag-Zor engineer hesitantly approached a human technician. Struggling with basic, he said, We not understand. Why no crush us?" The technician paused, blinking in confusion. "We never wanted to crush you," came the simple reply. "We just wanted to be left in peace." The Krag-Zor engineer repeated the phrase to himself as though it were a riddle in an alien tongue, something beyond his cultural comprehension. Finally, he muttered, "Your peace is strong. It was the closest his language could come to describing the concept. Elsewhere, in the lavish corridors of the Celestia Forum, a newly appointed Cygnus diplomat, fresh out of academy training, asked a pointed question during a reception. Why don't we just contain the humans, if they're so dangerous? The room fell silent, eyes shifting nervously. An older official let out a short, humorless laugh. Because they contain themselves, dear. They've built an internal set of ethical laws that keep their monstrous capacity in check, and they abide by them scrupulously. It would be far more terrifying if they had no such code. The young diplomat remained unconvinced, but over time, the layers of conversation and historical records would open her eyes to the depth of that statement. After a few more months of diplomatic adjustments, the furor died down. Kragzor vessels resumed traveling the hyperlanes, though they were uncharacteristically polite in dealing with border stations. The humans returned to forging alliances and exchanging cultural knowledge, like new forms of music, advanced medical tech, and, amusingly enough, recipes for pastries. Tensions that had reached a boiling point drifted back toward normalcy, though no one would ever forget how quickly it had all come undone. At one official dinner, a diurnal tour from the Serapex Collective found himself standing beside Lucille Carter. He watched her politely cut a piece of strange, earth-grown fruit and commented with a half-nervous chuckle. It's still difficult to reconcile your species' kindness with what happened to the Kragzor fleet. Carter gave a small, wistful smile. We're genuinely sorry it came to that. Our stance hasn't changed. We prefer negotiation, mutual benefit, the exchange of knowledge, any path that avoids violence. She set down her fork gently. But we are also a species that once nearly destroyed itself through war and had to learn the hard way. We wrote codes of conduct to restrain ourselves. We taught future generations that civility is a choice. And sometimes, when forced, we reveal how drastically we can act if those choices are trampled upon. Her eyes, for an instant, held that familiar glint, a whisper of ice beneath the warmth. Diurnal Tor felt a momentary chill in his multiple hearts. Then Carter's expression lightened, and she asked if he'd enjoyed the new earth fruit. Tor managed a polite nod. Once she turned away, he exhaled in relief, strangely grateful for the existence of those moral shackles within humanity. As time wore on, the story of the Kragzor fiasco became a case study in every interstellar politics course. Professors hammered home the lesson. Never assume that courtesy equates to weakness. Aspiring diplomats memorized the timeline of events, analyzing the humans' many attempts to avoid conflict before they finally demonstrated overwhelming force. Cadets in military academies studied the infiltration techniques, marveling at how humans had embedded 1,000 small threads into the tapestry of galactic infrastructure. Holodocumentaries dramatized the big reveals. Warships shutting down, planet-killer bombs locked by security protocols, ballistic missiles disintegrating under exotic gravitational pulses. Yet the galaxy never glimpsed anything beyond that demonstration. Humans, true to their word, did not expand their territory. They made no further demands, nor did they impose harsh punishment on the Kragzor beyond the necessary treaties. It was a quiet victory, the sort of victory that made the rest of the galaxy deeply uneasy, for it highlighted that the humans had achieved what they wanted without occupying a single planet, launching a single conventional missile, or losing more than a handful of their own personnel. It was the purest example of total control with minimal violence. At length, the collective conscience decided the best course was cautionary respect. It became the new standard. Treat humanity with the polite civility they showed everyone else. Old stereotypes about them being trivial or overly apologetic quickly died. Rare was the alien who dared laugh at a human for saying, "Pardon me." Instead, some even adopted those phrases themselves. Please and thank you spread through trade languages at a remarkable rate. And perhaps the greatest irony was that none of this changed the everyday life of the average human. Most had no idea their ambassadors had wielded unstoppable infiltration capabilities or that entire alien fleets had been silenced. Life rolled on. They debated local politics, worried about rising rent, and posted pictures of their pets on the interstellar net. If they were told their courtesy had saved them from a galaxy-wide war, many would just shrug and say, "It's nice to be nice, isn't it?" Indeed, it was. But the cosmic powers, old and new, would forever remember the chilling corollary. If that niceness was forcibly stripped away, the galaxy might see a reckoning that would rewrite civilization as they knew it. For behind every friendly handshake, every politely worded request, lurked the capacity to turn off the lights of entire star systems. And that was, in the end, the galaxy's most terrifying lesson. Don't make humans drop their civility. You might think they've caged their worst instincts. They have. What you shouldn't forget is that they built the cage themselves, and they can open it any time they please.